We've seen record highs for the Dow Jones Industrial Average recently as we go into the summer, but where now for the index as we continue into the summer months? And let's take a look at some of the Dow components in some more detail now with our next guest, Trevor Neil from Relative Rotation Graphs. Trevor, welcome. You brought along three stock picks from within the Dow 30 today, but first of all, introduce your RRG chart because I think it bears a little bit of introduction.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeremy. Well, the relative rotation graphs is a way of displaying complex data, multiple securities in one picture. And so we can compare many securities to each other versus something. So in this case, it's versus the Dow Jones Industrial Average. And here we've got some of the Dow 30 stocks. It's the RRG charts are divided up into four quadrants. The top right-hand quadrant is called the leading quadrant because it is on the right-hand side of 100, and this means it's got outperformance compared to the security's got outperformance compared to the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and it's above 100 on the y-axis, and this means with positive momentum. So these are stocks which are on a relative basis outperforming the Dow and also with upside momentum. The tails from the arrowheads, you see they've got dots. This is a week ago, a week before that, a week before that, going back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. The lower right-hand quadrant is on the right-hand side of 100, so this means it's got outperformance on a relative basis, but with declining positive momentum. So these are things which are doing well but are moving down in the list. On the left-hand side, and I've not shown them today, is on the upper left-hand side are things which have got upside momentum but are relatively underperforming. This can be a very interesting sector, and we see, for example, American Express has just moved across from being a relatively underperforming the Dow Jones into outperforming with positive momentum. So Warren Buffett will be pleased to see this RRG chart with Coca-Cola and American Express there. Bottom left, just to finish, is the worst place. This is on the left-hand side of 100, therefore underperforming on a relative basis, also with poor upside momentum. So these are the bad things getting worse. So we're not looking at that. We're looking over on the right-hand side here.
Well, okay. Well, let's start, if we can, with the first of your stock picks, which you chose, which is Apple. In the tech space, as we all know, it's a stock that's been much loved and indeed much criticised as well in the last year or so because we've seen this big drop. If we bring up the chart of Apple, we can see in some more detail. What you've asked us to provide here is a weekly chart. These are weekly candles and a 20-week moving average with an RSI at the bottom. Explain more about where we are, because clearly we've seen these record highs for Apple recently.
Yes. Now, the whole sector, the whole tech sector, and the Nasdaq 100 has been the leader. It's moved ahead of the Dow by a long shot. So we've had this great drive in the technology. Apple being part of that, a big part of that, it's had a setback, and that's what we did see in the RRG. So we saw Apple move down from the leading quadrant into the weakening quadrant, and it's now moving through the weakening quadrant, reflecting that absolute graph there where we've had this pullback. So it's lost a bit of its shine. It's a strong chart. It's there's nothing to say that this is the top in Apple. There's no suggestion that's the case. It's still outperforming the rest of the Dow stocks. It's just lost some of its upside momentum, but there's no reason to believe it's finished, and it's not going to regain its stature as one of the leaders in the future.
You wouldn't be surprised that over the summer we'll see more record highs for Apple?
No, I would not be surprised. And despite the position it's got in the relative rotation graph and the direction it's heading in, unless this maintains the direction, and of course that in itself means it is losing outperformance, I wouldn't be surprised to see this turn around because it is so far to the right. So we'll be watching that, and if I was a holder of Apple, there is a clear message here that this is now looking a bit wobbly. That doesn't mean it's finished, but there's some doubts. And I think that for many people, this whole technology area is very difficult to buy into at these high levels, and they may be recoiling against joining so late in this game.
Well, let's follow up on that and then say that if I'm a little bit nervous about these sort of levels for these technology stocks, where do we go as a place of safe refuge over the summer?
Yes, and so we'd probably be looking at the old securities, and one I like is Boeing. On the RRG chart, you can see that Boeing is, we're going to come to McDonald's in a moment, but Boeing is second most to the right. That means on a relative basis, it's the second most relatively best performing security in the Dow 30. It's moving northeast, and so that arrowhead pointing northeast like that means it's gaining in both relative performance and also momentum of relative performance. So this is a good place. It's going in the right direction. It should strengthen further. Now, when we look at this chart, it's a dramatic and a fantastic chart. It made its big break 3 months ago, and we have now powered ahead since, but there's a great deal of momentum in this. We see it in the RRG chart. This is a strong stock, which looks like it's going to get stronger and continue to be a leader.
The only thing I'd say about that is you asked for a relative strength index at the bottom here to be put on. It's overbought. What would you say to those that say, hang on a minute, it is overbought, we're overstretched here?
Okay, well, it's been overbought since November.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what I would say. It's really high reading in the RSI. It's called overbought, but actually when you know the mathematics of the RSI, what it actually tells you is that it's strong. High reading is actually strong. Yes, it's very hard normally for a security to maintain that strength, week in, week out, and very often we fall from that level, but we don't always fall. And being high in itself is not bearish. Mm-hmm. Being high is actually bullish. It's high. The RSI is high because the security is strong. It's hard for a security to maintain it, but this is a good example of sometimes how it does. And the message of going high in the RSI in this case was because the security itself was strong, and it's still strong.
Yeah. The third stock you brought along is McDonald's.
Yes.
Again, old technology.
Yes,
Which again, it's not too dissimilar from the charts that we've already seen. Let's on the RRG, it appears in the top right-hand corner, and it's got this curl to it.
Yes. So it's furthest to the right. So of all the Dow 30 stocks, it's in a relative basis, it's the one that's leading the whole group. So of this strong index, it's the strongest of the securities. It's turning round here, as you said, and you can see when we look at the absolute chart. We've soared ahead, and it's losing a bit of power, and that's exactly what we're seeing in the RRG chart, losing a bit of power. But this is quite common in stocks which are very, very strong. They slow up a bit, the RRG turns like this, and then it can turn quite easily regain its strength. So I think in this case the relative strength index is showing us a stock which got ahead of itself, and you can see how high the relative RSI got there, and now it's turned down, and so it's correcting a overbought situation. But this probably in my view represents a buy opportunity coming up, and it may be very brief. I think there's so much strength in this that actually the surprise may be how brief the weakness is.
Do you see much more weakness? I mean, we've got a weekly chart here. Of course, these individual candles are weekly. We've got a bit of a divergence going on here with the RSI pointing down. Do you see much more negativity coming through? I mean, that you've got here as ideal support, presumably, at the 20 period moving average.
Yes. So that 20-week moving average, of course, is the 200-day moving average. So that's a popular measure, and for many people of really confirmation of strength. We're well above it. I think that we're merely slowing up. I see those weekly shadows below, which are bullish in themselves, those two recent rejections there. So the pattern, the candlestick patterns are bullish. I think that this we will slow up, and then once the RSI has corrected itself, and that may not even be coming down to 50, maybe not even as low as that, I think the strength will reinsert itself, because there is a lot of strength in this security, and it's quite natural for it to have a sort of slowing up phase.
Yes. Okay, all right, something for the summer.
Yes, indeed.
Trevor, thanks so much indeed. Trevor Neil is from Relative Rotation Graphs, where he and a colleague founded the RRGs, and you can find out more about these on the RRG website.